I'll never forget some advice I received many years ago when I was responsible for one of our homes at L'Arche and needed to keep track of the finances. It was a household of a dozen people, and people didn't always keep their receipts or write the proper amount in the checkbook. And exasperated, I remember sitting down with our accountant and setting out the problem and proposing some adjustments to how we manage things. The accountant listened carefully, and then he said kindly, "You know, sometimes when we disagree about money, it's not really about money. It's really about something else. But it's easier to argue about money than it is to look at what's really going on." And so he asked me, just a guess, is it possible there's something else going on here? I felt as though he had seen into my soul. How did he know that there were, in fact, a number of other points of tension with the team? So I've never forgotten that. When we think we're arguing about money, it's probably not about money. It's probably about something else. In today's gospel, we find Jesus teaching in the temple, caught up in an argument about money. He's asked what seems to be a simple enough question. Is it lawful to pay taxes? Of course it is. We have to pay taxes. So why the heated answer? Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? It sounds like Jesus knows that it's not really about money. It's about something else. To get at what's going on in this scene, it may help to zoom out and to take a wider look at where we are in the narrative arc of Matthew's gospel. Just before today's passage from chapter 22, we hear about Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and we're told it's a city in turmoil. It's the start of Passover, when the usual population of Jerusalem would have quadrupled in size. Outside the temple, the streets are packed with Jewish people celebrating the feast of their liberation from slavery under Pharaoh, but also yearning for a Messiah to deliver them from their Roman occupiers at that time. Keeping watch over the crowds are the imperial troops of Pontius Pilate, present as a deterrent to any civil unrest that might occur with this influx of visitors. Inside the temple, also teeming with pilgrims, we find Jesus in a series of increasingly tense exchanges. He overturns the tables of the money changers. He cures those in need of healing, invoking the anger of the chief priests and the scribes. They press him with questions about his authority. They want to arrest him, but they fear the crowds who regard Jesus as a prophet. In today's passage, Jesus is approached by some unlikely allies. There were the supporters of Herod, who cooperated with the Roman rulers, and there were the Pharisees, religious leaders concerned with a strict interpretation of Jewish law. And these groups team up to set a trap for Jesus. They begin with some false flattery. "Teacher, we know that you are sincere," and so on. "Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor?" Here's the trap. If Jesus says, no, it's not lawful to pay taxes, then he places himself in jeopardy with the Roman authorities, subject to arrest and crucifixion. But if he says, yes, it's lawful to pay the imperial tax, then he may lose favor with those in the crowd who bristle at the injustice of paying a tax to their Roman occupiers. Or he might draw criticism from the Pharisees for breaking Jewish law, because paying the Roman tax with a Roman coin meant using a currency that bore the image of Caesar and the inscription, Son of God. thereby violating the commandment to have no other gods except the Lord, and the commandment to not make any images of God. So Jesus says, "Why are you putting me to the test?" The Greek word for test is the same word that we hear in the Lord's Prayer, "Lead us not into temptation," or "Do not bring us to the time of trial." So test or temptation or trial. We hear it too in chapter 4 of Matthew's Gospel, when Jesus is tested in the wilderness. The devil takes him to the holy city and places him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down." Jesus replies, "Do not put the Lord your God to the test." Put to the test. It seems that everywhere we look in the world, we find people put to the test. Impossible, unthinkable tests. Tests that most of us here today probably cannot imagine. The test of having loved ones slaughtered in their homes or abducted and taken prisoner. What wouldn't I do to get them back? The test of decades of confinement in an occupied territory. What wouldn't I do to break free? The test of ongoing trauma passed from one generation to the next to the next. Unfathomable loss, insurmountable grief. What wouldn't I do to protect my loved ones, to demand justice, to seek a better future for my children? And though these impossible tests may seem to take place in faraway lands, we are all affected through various degrees of connection, through our neighbors, colleagues, friends. There is great pressure to be categorical or to take sides. As people of faith longing for peace, where can we find hope in this time of trial? Turning back to this gospel message, let's consider what Jesus does when he is put to the test. First, he takes a pause. When he responds, "Show me the coin used for the tax," he shifts the focus back to his questioners, and they produce a Roman coin, which would have been sacrilegious to carry in the temple. Temple coinage did not have images of living things. "Whose image is this?" he asks. Everyone knew whose image it was. I'm not sure that Jesus needed to see a coin, but I do imagine that asking for it gave him a moment to take a few breaths before responding. We often hear of Jesus taking a pause, whether withdrawing from a crowd to rest and pray, or remaining within a tense exchange, but somehow creating some space in that moment. We recall when an angry crowd brings him a woman accused of adultery, and he stoops down and writes on the ground with his finger before he answers, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." A pause. It may seem like a small thing, but sometimes the pause is everything when we're being put to the test. In the words of Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and survivor of Nazi concentration camps, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. A part of me immediately wants to say, yeah, but that's not always possible, or That's not always true, or what about? However, when someone who has survived such unfathomable suffering speaks, I need to listen and ask what I can learn. Next, Jesus refuses to be confined to either or thinking. He takes a yes or no question and he reframes it. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Sometimes this little word "and" can help us find a way forward when we're stuck in false dichotomies. Sometimes it helps to consider where one thing may be true and another at the same time may also be true. Third, Jesus, in his wisdom, refocuses the conversation on what really matters. That is, our fundamental identity as human beings created in the image and likeness of God. This is our deepest identity. Dr. Zeldin Abuelaish is a Palestinian-Canadian physician, currently teaching at the University of Toronto in the School of Public Health. Born and raised in a refugee camp in Gaza, he completed medical studies abroad and spent decades practicing medicine in both Israel and Palestine. He believes that the work of healthcare, of healing, is crucial in building bridges in places of conflict, in restoring an awareness of our common humanity. There is no difference, he says, between a Palestinian newborn and an Israeli newborn. No difference. Nominated several times for the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Abuelaish carries a personal commitment to peace at great personal sacrifice. In January of 2009, 3 of his children were killed in their bedroom when his family's home in Gaza was hit by Israeli rockets. Still, he insists that violence is never the answer, even in retaliation. He will tell you that because of his love for his children, both his daughters who have died and for his 5 living children, because of this love and because of his belief in the dignity and worth of every child, he will tell you that peace is the only way forward. He compares Israel and Palestine to conjoined twins with one heart and one brain. Any harm to one will affect the other. When someone who has survived such unfathomable suffering speaks, I know I need to listen and ask what I can learn. We belong to God, and it is in this belonging that we are called to participate in God's work of compassion and justice and mercy. In this time of trial and testing in our world. In our own hearts and lives, we can do our best to practice the pause in difficult moments and pray for God to speak grace into those spaces. In our conversations with others, we can refuse to be trapped by false dichotomies in front of the complexities of human suffering. It is possible for us to be horrified by both the suffering of one group of people and by the suffering of another group of people at the same time. And in our public spaces, in our world, we can and must commit to recognizing and honoring the image of God in one another. This means refusing to dehumanize the other and committing to the work of healing wherever possible in our daily lives, giving to God what belongs to God, ourselves. It's hard and it's humbling, but we can pray for God to lead us in reaching out to one another, to be present and to listen, even when understanding seems beyond reach. In a wisdom teaching from one Jewish rabbi, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. We are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are we free to abandon it.